The day my wife looked at my unemployment letter and asked how long she was supposed to carry a man like me, I learned that losing a job is not always the worst thing a man can lose. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our small house outside Columbus, Ohio, with a white envelope from Harrington Manufacturing lying open beside my coffee. The words "position eliminated" printed so cleanly, they almost looked polite. 20 years of showing up early, staying late, training younger managers, solving problems nobody wanted to touch, and it all came down to one sentence written by someone who probably did not know my middle name. My hands were still steady when I read it. That surprised me. Maybe because I had spent enough years in factories to know machines break, orders vanish, companies merge, and loyal men can be turned into line items before lunch. What shook me was not the letter. It was Melissa standing by the sink in her gray work dress, arms folded, looking at me like the paper had confirmed something she had suspected for years. "So what now, Caleb?" she asked. No softness. No hand on my shoulder. No, "we will figure this out." Just what now? The way a landlord asks about overdue rent. I looked up at her, trying to find the woman who used to pack my lunch with little notes tucked under the sandwich bag. The woman who cried when we bought this house, because she said it finally felt like we were becoming real adults. She was still there somewhere under the makeup, the sharp earrings, the polished disappointment. But that morning, she looked tired of me in a way that had nothing to do with the job. "I will find something," I said. "I have severance for 8 weeks. I already called 2 contacts." She laughed once, short and empty. That laugh did more damage than the letter. "Contacts? Caleb, you are 42. You have been at the same place forever. You do not even know how the world works anymore." The refrigerator hummed behind her. Rain tapped gently against the window over the sink. Outside, the trash truck groaned down the street, stopping in front of houses where men still had paychecks and wives still waved goodbye like ordinary mornings meant something. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to stack my years of mortgage payments, car repairs, insurance forms, late-night shifts, and quiet sacrifices on the table until they looked like proof that I had been worth keeping. But pride does strange things when it is wounded by someone you love. It turns heavy, not loud. "I am not asking you to carry me," I said. Melissa turned from the sink and looked straight at me. "That is exactly what you are doing. And I am done being married to potential." The word potential landed like a verdict. Not partner. Not husband. Potential. Something unfinished, disappointing, still waiting to become useful. I stared at the unemployment letter again because it was easier than staring at her. 8 weeks of severance. A retirement account I did not want to touch. A mortgage due on the 1st. A woman across the room already measuring the distance to the door. Then my phone buzzed. I thought it might be one of the contacts I had texted. It was not. It was Tyler Grant, my best friend since high school. He had sent a message asking if I was okay. I did not know then that Tyler already knew more about my marriage than I did. I did not know he had been answering Melissa's calls for months, listening to her complain about my long hours, my old truck, my lack of ambition, the way our life felt too small for the woman she imagined herself becoming. I did not know that while I was trying to figure out how to replace my income, the 2 people closest to me were already replacing me in conversations I had never been invited to hear. Melissa picked up her purse from the counter. "I am staying with my sister tonight," she said. "I need space." Space. That is the word people use when they want distance without sounding cruel. She walked past me without touching my shoulder, without looking at the envelope again, without asking whether I had eaten breakfast. The front door closed softly behind her. Not slammed. That would have been easier. A slammed door admits anger. A soft door says the decision has already been made. I sat in the kitchen until my coffee went cold, listening to the rain, the refrigerator, the empty house, and the small sound of my life rearranging itself around one brutal truth. I had lost my job that morning, but by nightfall, I would begin to understand that my job had only been the first thing Melissa planned to leave behind. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, but the kitchen still felt damp with everything Melissa had left unsaid. Caleb sat at the table with the unemployment letter folded beside his phone, watching gray light slide across the floorboards as if the whole house had aged in one day. The coffee cup was still there, cold and ring brown at the bottom. Melissa's chair was pushed in perfectly, which somehow made her absence feel sharper. He opened his laptop and started doing what men like him do when panic tries to climb the walls. He made lists. Mortgage. Utilities. health insurance, severance, groceries, resume, calls to make before Monday. The numbers were not pretty, but they were not impossible. He had survived tight months before. He had worked double shifts after his father got sick. He had patched a roof with borrowed tools, stretched paychecks with store-brand cereal, and once sold his fishing boat to cover Melissa's dental surgery because she was embarrassed by the payment plan. Hard was not new. What was new was the empty place where partnership should have been. Around 5:30, Tyler called. Caleb stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Hey," Tyler said, voice careful. "Too careful. Melissa told me what happened." Caleb leaned back slowly. "Did she?" A pause. "Small, but there. She said Harrington let you go." "Man, I am sorry." Caleb looked at the letter. It was a layoff. Half the department. Still, that is rough. Tyler sounded concerned, but beneath it Caleb heard something else. Distance. The kind men put in their voice when they already know which side of a room they plan to stand on. Tyler had been his best friend since they were 16, back when they worked summer jobs loading mulch at a garden center and thought $20 felt like freedom. He had stood beside Caleb at the wedding, drunk too much champagne, and told Melissa she was marrying the most loyal man in Ohio. For years, Tyler had been family. The kind who knew the garage code, borrowed tools without asking, and sat at their table on Sundays eating chili while football played too loud. "She said she is staying with her sister," Caleb said. "Yeah," Tyler answered quickly. "Probably just needs to clear her head." Caleb's fingers tightened around the phone. "Funny. She told you that before she told me she was leaving." The line went quiet again. This time the silence did not feel accidental. "I just meant she called me after," Tyler said. "She was upset." Caleb turned toward the window over the sink. Outside, the maple tree dripped rainwater in slow intervals. One drop, then another. A house can be full of warning signs if a man finally stops explaining them away. "How long has she been calling you upset?" Caleb asked. Tyler gave a short laugh that tried to sound casual and failed. "Come on, man. Do not do that. She vents sometimes. That is all." Vents. Another clean word for something messy. Caleb had heard enough clean words that day to know they were usually chosen by people trying not to say the real ones. "About me?" Tyler sighed. "About the marriage. About feeling stuck. About wanting more. You know how she gets." Caleb did know. He knew the bright version of Melissa that came alive in restaurants they could barely afford, the version that smiled wider when someone mentioned promotions or vacations or new houses with stone fireplaces. He knew how she looked at his old truck when Tyler bought his new one. He knew how her voice changed when she talked about couples who were moving up, as if life were a race and Caleb had stopped running without telling her. What he had not known was that she had been telling Tyler all of it while Caleb was still trying to be proud of what they had. "You should have told me," Caleb said. Tyler's voice hardened just enough to reveal the truth underneath. "It was not my place." Caleb almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because betrayal often arrives wearing the uniform of respect. "Not my place. Privacy. Space. Venting. Words people use to stand close to damage while pretending their hands are clean." "Right," Caleb said. "Not your place." Tyler softened quickly. "Listen, do not spiral. You will land on your feet. You always do." That sentence should have comforted him. Instead, it exposed another quiet wound. Everyone trusted Caleb to survive. That was different from anyone caring what survival cost him. After the call ended, Caleb set the phone face down and opened his resume file. The document was 5 years old. His last job title looked smaller than it had that morning. He updated dates, rewrote bullet points, added certifications, and deleted a line about loyalty because it suddenly felt like a word from a language he no longer spoke. At 7, Melissa texted, "I need time to think." At 7:15, Tyler texted, "Give her space, brother." Caleb looked at both messages side by side, and the kitchen seemed to tilt just enough for him to see the shape of the thing forming in front of him. His wife was not simply leaving to breathe. His best friend was not simply being supportive. There was a conversation happening around his life, and he was the last man invited into it. He closed the laptop, stood, and washed the cold coffee from his cup. The water ran clear after a few seconds. Caleb watched it disappear down the drain and felt something inside him settle. He could not control who left. He could control how much of himself he handed them on the way out. The next morning arrived without mercy, bright and clean, like the sky had not heard anything that happened in Caleb's kitchen the day before. He woke on the couch at 6:12 with his laptop still open on the coffee table, his resume glowing faintly on the screen, and a stiffness in his neck that reminded him he had not gone upstairs to bed. The bedroom felt like Melissa's territory now, even though half the mortgage had come from his paychecks for 11 years. He sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and listened to the house. No shower running. No closet door sliding open. No soft complaint from Melissa about the coffee being too strong. Just the furnace clicking on and the old pipes knocking once behind the wall. The silence should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a witness. Caleb made toast because it was easy, then stood over the sink eating it plain while scrolling through job listings on his phone. Operations manager, production supervisor, logistics coordinator. Every posting wanted 10 years of experience, and the energy of a 28-year-old who could pretend a 60-hour week was an opportunity. He saved 6 listings, sent 2 resumes, and forced himself not to count the days of severance again. Counting money too often makes it disappear faster in your mind. At 8:30, Melissa came home. He heard her car before he saw her, the familiar turn into the driveway, the careful pause before the engine shut off. She entered through the front door wearing the same gray dress, but now with a different coat, one Caleb did not recognize. Her hair was smooth, her lipstick fresh, and her face arranged into something halfway between concern and inconvenience. "You slept down here?" she asked. Caleb looked at the couch, then back at her. "Looks like it." She set her purse on the entry table. Not the kitchen counter like usual. The entry table. Temporary placement. Visitor behavior. "I am here to get some things," she said. "A few days' worth." "From your sister's place?" Caleb asked. Her eyes flicked up too quickly. "Yes." He nodded once. A man can learn a lot from a fast answer. Melissa walked upstairs, and Caleb stayed in the kitchen because following her would have made him look like he was chasing the version of his marriage that had already left the room. Drawers opened above him. Closet hangers scraped. A suitcase rolled across the bedroom floor. Each sound had a clean little edge. While she packed, his phone buzzed. "Tyler, you doing okay this morning?" Caleb stared at it, then looked up toward the ceiling. The timing was too perfect. Yesterday, Tyler had said it was not his place. Today, he knew there was a morning worth checking on. Caleb typed, "I am fine," then deleted it. He typed, "Ask Melissa," then deleted that too. Finally, he set the phone face down. Not every message deserves a doorway. When Melissa came back downstairs, she had a small suitcase and a canvas tote full of shoes. "I think we need to talk about what separation looks like," she said. There it was. Not space anymore. Separation. The word had changed clothes overnight. Caleb folded his hands on the table. "Did your sister help you land on that?" Melissa's mouth tightened. "Do not make this ugly." He almost laughed at how familiar that sounded, even though she had never said it before. "People preparing to hurt you often ask you to keep the room clean for them." "I am not making it anything," Caleb said. "I am listening." She stood across from him, one hand on the suitcase handle. "I cannot keep shrinking my life around uncertainty." The word uncertainty hung between them, polished and cruel. Yesterday he had lost his job. Today he had become uncertainty. Not a husband in a hard season. Not a man with 20 years of work behind him. A risk factor. A burden with a wedding ring. "I understand," he said quietly. That answer disappointed her. He saw it. She had expected defense, pleading, maybe anger she could point to later as proof that she had no choice. Calm gave her nothing to hold. She looked away first. "Tyler thinks it might be good for both of us to have room to think." Caleb's chest went still. Not because he was surprised. Because confirmation always feels colder than suspicion. "Tyler thinks," he repeated. Melissa blinked, realizing too late what she had given away. "I mean, I talked to him because he knows you." Caleb stood, walked to the counter, and picked up the unemployment letter. He folded it carefully and placed it inside a drawer with the warranties, manuals, and old tax forms. Then he closed the drawer. "Tyler knows the version of me who trusted him," he said. Melissa's face changed, just a little. Not enough to apologize. Enough to understand that something had shifted. She reached for the suitcase. "I will call you later." Caleb looked at her hand on the handle, at the purse on her shoulder, at the woman who had once promised to build a life with him and now needed advice from his best friend on how to step away from it. "No," he said. "Email me. If this is separation, let us stop pretending it is just a bad day." She froze near the door. Outside, sunlight made the wet driveway shine like glass. Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the letter arrived, she had no clean word ready. Caleb watched her leave, not with rage, not with panic, but with the controlled ache of a man finally seeing the architecture of his own replacement. The job was gone. The marriage was cracking. And Tyler's fingerprints were starting to show on every door Melissa opened. By noon, Caleb had stopped waiting for the next blow and started preparing for the shape of it. The house felt too clean after Melissa left, the way a room feels after people remove furniture and leave dents in the carpet. He carried his laptop to the kitchen table, opened a new folder, and named it Separation Records. The name looked strange on the screen, official and cold, but cold was useful. Cold kept his hand steady. He took screenshots of Melissa's texts, Tyler's messages, the mortgage balance, the joint account, the severance details, and the bills due before the first of the month. He was not building a case to hurt anyone. He was building a wall around the truth before someone else painted over it. At 1:15, he called a family attorney named Karen Whitmore, a woman recommended by a former coworker who had survived a quiet divorce that turned expensive the moment feelings started wearing suits. Karen's assistant gave him a consultation for the next morning and told him to gather financial documents, employment records, and written communication. Written communication. Caleb looked at Melissa's last message again. I need time to think. He looked at Tyler's. Give her space, brother. Brother. The word had a bitter taste now. Caleb had shared too much life with Tyler for the betrayal to feel dramatic. Real betrayal is not always a hidden hotel key or a secret midnight call. Sometimes it is your best friend becoming the person your wife calls before she decides whether to stay married to you. At 2:30, Caleb drove to the bank. He did not empty the joint account. He did not make a scene. He opened a separate checking account, redirected his severance deposit, and scheduled automatic payments for his half of the mortgage and utilities. The banker, a young man with perfect hair and a wedding photo on his desk, asked if he was making changes because of a job transition. Caleb looked at the photo, at the bride smiling beside the man who still believed paperwork was just paperwork, and said something like that. Outside, the air had warmed, and sunlight bounced off the windshield hard enough to make him squint. He sat in the truck for a moment before starting it, watching people walk in and out of the bank carrying ordinary problems. Debit cards, loan payments, cashier's checks, lives still pretending they were simple. His phone rang. Tyler again. This time Caleb answered. Hey. Tyler said, too casual. Melissa is pretty upset. She said you told her to email you. Caleb rested one hand on the steering wheel. That is right. Man, that sounds kind of cold. Caleb watched a woman load groceries into a minivan, her little boy trying to help with a bag twice his size. Cold is not the same as careless. Tyler sighed. I just think you two should not make permanent decisions in a bad week. There it was again. You two. Like Tyler was standing above the marriage, fair and balanced, not already inside the private weather of it. How long have you been advising my wife about our marriage? Caleb asked. Silence. A car horn sounded somewhere near the intersection. Tyler cleared his throat. Advising is a strong word. Then pick a weaker one that tells the truth. Tyler's voice tightened. She needed someone to talk to. Caleb nodded slowly, though Tyler could not see it. And you needed to be needed. That silence was different. Not empty. Hit. Tyler said his name. But Caleb was already done with the part of himself that wanted explanations from people who had enjoyed access they had not earned. Do not contact me about Melissa again, Caleb said. If she needs to talk, she can email me. If this becomes legal, my attorney will respond. Caleb, come on. No. Caleb said, calm as a closed door. You stepped out of friendship when you stepped into my marriage. He ended the call before Tyler could turn apology into argument. By 4, Caleb was back home with folders from the office supply store, a legal pad, and a cheap printer that took 20 minutes to connect to Wi-Fi. The small frustration almost broke him more than the big one. There he was, a grown man with an unemployment letter, a failing marriage, and a printer blinking orange like it too had doubts about his future. He laughed once, quietly, and the sound surprised him. Not because anything was funny, but because some part of him had survived the morning. At 6, he reheated soup and ate alone at the kitchen table. Melissa texted at 6:20. Tyler said you were rude to him. Caleb stared at the message, then set the phone down without answering. The triangle had shown itself completely now. She did not ask how he was. She did not ask about the job search. She reported Tyler's feelings like Caleb was the disturbance in a system they had built without him. He opened his laptop and finished updating his resume. At the bottom, under leadership experience, he typed one sentence and then paused. Managed crisis response under pressure. He almost deleted it. Then he left it there. Because for the first time all day, it was true in more ways than one. Caleb woke up the next morning with the sunlight spilling across his bedroom floor, a reminder that life continued even when it felt like everything had stopped. He dressed carefully, choosing neutral colors that gave him a sense of control, and made a quick breakfast, his movements precise, almost ritualistic, as he tried to ground himself in the ordinary while his mind raced with the extraordinary events from the day before. Emails and messages from potential employers filled his inbox, each one a small thread of possibility weaving through the tension that had settled in his chest. He drafted polite, professional responses, checking grammar and tone, aware that any misstep could undermine the cautious confidence he was trying to project. After breakfast, he decided to tackle the financial matters more deeply, sorting bills and organizing receipts into labeled folders, each action a small anchor in the storm of uncertainty that had taken over his home. As he worked, his phone buzzed, a message from his sister offering encouragement, reminding him that support still existed beyond the walls of betrayal and disappointment. He paused to read it, a faint smile breaking through the tension, realizing that some bonds remained unbroken, offering a subtle but crucial comfort. By late morning, he was ready to leave the house, heading to a local cafe to conduct some research on upcoming job fairs and networking events, seeking both distraction and a proactive step forward, knowing that momentum mattered more than dwelling on resentment. At the cafe, he met with a former colleague who shared tips and insights on the industry. Caleb listening intently, asking questions, and taking notes, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, and allowing the conversation to shift his focus from the personal upheaval to professional opportunity. As he sipped his coffee, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on the past year, the sudden divorce, the betrayal of trust by people he had considered close, and the awkward dynamics that had forced him to navigate social spaces differently. He realized that while his wife's decisions and his best friend's behavior had introduced chaos, his own response could define the trajectory of his life moving forward. Finishing his coffee, he returned home with a renewed sense of purpose, prioritizing tasks for the rest of the day. From sending follow-up emails to updating his resume and LinkedIn profile with careful attention to detail. Each entry a testament to resilience and professionalism. In the afternoon, he reviewed his legal documents, ensuring that all records were organized, accessible, and accurate. Understanding that preparation was power and clarity was protection, a practical reassurance against the unpredictability of interactions with his ex-wife and former friend. He set aside time to exercise, jogging through familiar streets, letting the rhythmic motion of his feet against the pavement and the crisp air clear his mind, fostering mental clarity alongside physical well-being. By evening, he had a clear plan for the following day, a combination of administrative tasks, professional networking, and personal reflection, acknowledging that while he could not control the actions of others, he could control his own responses and use them to rebuild a foundation of stability, integrity, and personal strength. Caleb sat at his desk, reviewing the day, noting accomplishments, and preparing a list for tomorrow, a tangible roadmap through uncertainty, understanding that consistency, preparation, and patience were his allies in the journey ahead. By the third morning, Caleb understood that rebuilding a life is not one dramatic decision. It is 100 ordinary choices made while nobody is watching. He woke before 7, made coffee, ironed a white shirt he had not worn since his last performance review at Harrington, and sat at the kitchen table with his resume printed beside a list of companies within 30 miles of Columbus. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt like it was waiting for Melissa to return and define the day. It felt like a workshop. Something damaged had been placed on the bench, and Caleb was learning which parts could be repaired and which needed to be replaced. At 9, he logged into a virtual interview with a regional packaging company outside Grove City. The hiring manager was younger than him by at least 10 years, with wireless earbuds and a framed college diploma behind him, but Caleb did not let that shrink him. He spoke plainly about production schedules, inventory bottlenecks, safety procedures, and the kind of pressure that comes when a line stops and 20 people look to you for answers. Halfway through the call, the manager leaned forward and said, "You sound like someone who has actually solved problems, not just managed reports." Caleb felt the first small spark of pride he had allowed himself since the letter arrived. "That is because machines do not care about titles," he said. "They only care whether someone knows what to do next." After the interview, he sat back and let the silence settle. Not victory yet, not even close, but movement. Around noon, Karen Whitmore called after reviewing his documents. Her voice was calm, direct, and professional. She explained that Melissa had not filed anything yet, but the language in her messages suggested she was preparing for separation and perhaps trying to frame the marriage as emotionally unsupported. Caleb looked at the printed texts on the table, Tyler's name appearing too often in places it did not belong. "Can that matter?" he asked. Karen paused. "It can matter if it shows third-party interference, financial decisions, or a pattern of planning. But more importantly, it helps you stay grounded in facts." Facts. The word had become a railing on a narrow staircase. He told her about Tyler's calls, the advice to give Melissa space, the way Melissa had repeated Tyler's feelings as if Caleb were responsible for them too. Karen did not sound surprised. "Then keep communication written. Do not debate through him. Do not respond emotionally. And do not let unemployment make you feel legally powerless." Caleb wrote that down. "Do not let unemployment make you feel powerless." At 2, Melissa emailed. The subject line was about us. He stared at it for nearly a minute before opening it. Her message was long, careful, and full of phrases that sounded borrowed from conversations he had not heard. "I feel like I have been carrying emotional weight alone. I need to choose stability. Tyler has helped me see that I deserve a partner who is moving forward." There it was, dressed in grammar and concern. Tyler had helped her see. Caleb read the line twice, then printed the email and placed it in the folder. He did not answer right away. Instead, he walked outside and stood beside the old truck in the driveway. The paint was chipped near the hood. The left mirror had a crack he had meant to replace for months. Melissa used to say the truck embarrassed her. Tyler used to laugh and say Caleb would drive it until the wheels filed for divorce. Caleb ran his hand along the fender and felt something close to affection. The truck was old, yes, but it had carried lumber, groceries, furniture, late-night medicine, and every hard season without pretending to be more than it was. There was honor in that. At 4, Caleb replied to Melissa with 3 sentences. "I received your email. I will respond to separation matters after speaking with counsel. Please keep future communication between us in writing and do not use Tyler as a messenger." He read it once, removed nothing, added nothing, and sent it. The calm of it surprised him. Not because he did not hurt. He did. But pain was no longer driving. By evening, Tyler called again. Caleb let it ring. Then Melissa texted almost immediately. "Did you block him?" He looked at the message and finally saw the absurdity clearly. She had left the house, shifted the marriage into separation, leaned on his best friend for guidance, and still expected access to him on demand. He turned the phone face down and opened his laptop. A second interview request had arrived, this one from a logistics firm near Dayton. Caleb smiled for the first time that day, small but real. Life had not become easy. The mortgage was still due. His marriage was still broken. His best friend's shadow was still standing where trust used to be. But a door had opened that did not lead backward. He scheduled the interview, washed his dinner plate, and shut off the kitchen light. In the dark reflection of the window, he saw a tired man, unemployed and alone, but not defeated. That mattered, because sometimes the first sign that a man is coming back is not applause, not revenge, not some grand reveal. Sometimes it is one clean email, one unanswered call, one interview on the calendar, and the quiet decision to stop asking people who abandoned you to explain your worth. 3 weeks later, Caleb received the invitation in the mail, and for a full minute he thought it had been delivered to the wrong house. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, expensive, with his name written in careful blue ink across the front. No return address, just his name, his street, and a little gold seal pressed into the flap like someone had tried to make cruelty look elegant. He was standing at the kitchen counter after his second interview with the logistics firm near Dayton, still wearing the same white shirt from the video call, sleeves rolled up, a pin tucked behind his ear, because he had been editing notes for a follow-up email. The house had become quieter over those weeks, but not emptier. There were folders on the table, job applications on the laptop, meal prep containers in the refrigerator, and a calendar on the wall with interviews, attorney calls, and mortgage dates marked in black ink. The life Melissa had called uncertain was slowly becoming organized without her. Caleb slid a finger under the envelope flap and pulled out the card. At first, his eyes caught only pieces. Melissa and Carter. Tyler James Grant. Request the honor. Saturday afternoon. The country club at Muirfield. His hand did not shake. That surprised him. The body sometimes understands an ending before the heart stops negotiating with it. He read the invitation again, slower this time, and the kitchen seemed to narrow around him. Not because Melissa was marrying someone. Not even because it was Tyler. It was the speed of it, the neatness of it, the assumption that Caleb would receive the announcement like a polite neighbor instead of the man whose life had been cut open to make room for it. Tucked behind the invitation was a smaller card. We hope you can attend. It would mean a lot for everyone to move forward with Grace. Caleb stared at the word Grace until it became meaningless. Grace, apparently, meant being invited to watch your former wife marry the friend who had advised her through leaving you. Grace meant standing quietly while other people turned betrayal into a centerpiece. Grace meant swallowing the truth so nobody else had to taste it. His phone buzzed on the counter. Karen Whitmore. He answered without taking his eyes off the invitation. Did you receive something? She asked. Caleb let out a breath through his nose. A wedding invitation. Karen was silent for half a second. From them. Yes. Papers shifted on her end. Do not respond emotionally. Caleb almost laughed. That seems to be the theme of my life now. Caleb, she said, softer but firm. There is a reason I am calling. Melissa's attorney sent over a proposed settlement this morning. It is aggressive. She is requesting a larger share of home equity, temporary support due to your employment transition, and language stating the separation resulted from incompatibility during your unemployment. He looked at the card in his hand. Everyone moved forward with grace. There it was. The story being dressed before the guests arrived. And Tyler, he asked. Not named, of course. But the timing matters. Your documentation matters. Caleb set the invitation on the counter beside the unemployment letter he had never thrown away. 2 papers. 2 performances. One said a company no longer needed him. The other said his marriage had found a replacement and wanted him to applaud. What do you recommend? He asked. Karen's voice sharpened into law. We respond with facts. Employment records. Financial contributions. Written communication. Her reliance on Tyler as an outside influence. The wedding date. The timeline. We do not make it emotional. We make it impossible to rewrite. Impossible to rewrite. Caleb looked around the kitchen, at the table where Melissa had judged him, the sink where she had folded her arms, the chair where he had sat updating a resume while his best friend became her counselor, then her fiancé. Something settled in him. Not rage. Not revenge. Alignment. I will attend, he said. Karen paused. That is not a legal requirement. I know. Then why? Caleb picked up the smaller card again. It would mean a lot. Because they invited me to be evidence that I accepted their version. I am not going to cause a scene. I am not going to speak unless spoken to. But I will not hide so they can call it grace. That evening, Caleb bought a new suit. Nothing flashy. Charcoal gray, clean lines, adjusted at the sleeves by a tailor who told him he carried himself like a man preparing for a courtroom. Caleb did not correct him. On the drive home, the logistics firm called. They offered him the operations director role, with better pay than Harrington and a start date in 2 weeks. He pulled into a grocery store parking lot before answering, because some moments deserve both hands on the wheel. When the offer came through, he closed his eyes and let the silence hold it. Then he accepted. The first person he told was not Melissa, not Tyler, not anyone who had measured him by the worst week of his life. He called Karen to update the employment file. Then he went home, hung the new suit on the bedroom door, and placed the wedding invitation in the folder marked separation records. Saturday was no longer just their wedding day. It was the day Caleb would walk into a room built on a lie, carrying nothing but truth, a job offer, and the kind of calm that makes people wonder what else they failed to notice. Saturday arrived with a cold blue sky and the kind of sunshine that makes every window look polished for judgment. Caleb stood in front of the bedroom mirror wearing the charcoal suit, adjusting his tie with hands that no longer shook. The man looking back at him was not the same man who had sat at the kitchen table with an unemployment letter and cold coffee. He was still tired. He was still carrying the ache of betrayal in places no tailor could measure. But he was upright, employed, prepared, and most importantly, he was no longer asking the people who left him to explain his value. The country club at Muirfield sat behind stone gates and long green lawns, the kind of place Melissa had always admired from a distance when they drove past on Sunday afternoons. Back then, she would mention how beautiful the grounds were, how nice it must be to belong somewhere like that, and Caleb would squeeze her hand and say maybe someday. Someday had apparently arrived without him. He parked near the back, not because he was hiding, but because he no longer needed the front of anything to prove he had arrived. Inside, the lobby smelled like lilies, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Guests turned as he entered, little glances darting across the room like birds startled from a fence. He saw recognition first, then discomfort. People knew enough to stare and not enough to understand. Caleb signed the guest book in steady handwriting, then stepped into the ceremony room and took a seat near the back aisle. No drama. No whispering. No speech rehearsed in his pocket. Just presence. That was enough. Tyler saw him first. He stood near the front in a navy suit, smiling too hard, one hand clasped around the other like he was holding himself together by force. For half a second, the old Tyler appeared there, the teenager loading mulch beside Caleb, the best man laughing into a champagne glass, the friend who once knew every flaw and stayed anyway. Then the groom looked away. Melissa entered a few minutes later, and the room rose around her. She wore ivory lace and a careful smile, beautiful in the way people look when they have convinced themselves beauty can outrun consequence. Then her eyes found Caleb. Her smile did not vanish. It faltered, just enough for the first row to notice. He did not nod. He did not glare. He simply looked at her with the calm of a man who had already survived the part she thought would break him. The ceremony began. Words like commitment, trust, and partnership floated through the room, soft and decorative, and Caleb listened without bitterness. A strange peace came over him, not because the words were false, but because they were true enough to hurt when placed in the wrong hands. When the officiant asked if anyone present came with love and support for the couple, Melissa's eyes flicked again toward the back row. Maybe she expected him to shift, to leave, to prove her story right by becoming the unstable man she had described in emails. Caleb stayed still. Grace was not pretending nothing happened. Grace was refusing to become what they needed him to be. At the reception, he planned to leave after signing the card Karen had advised him to bring. A simple note wishing them well without surrendering the truth. But the twist came before dessert. A man Caleb recognized from the logistics firm approached him near the hallway, smiling warmly. "Caleb Harper," he said. "I thought that was you. I am glad you accepted Dayton. We are lucky to have you." The room was close enough to hear. Tyler heard. Melissa heard. So did her parents. Standing beside the gift table with champagne, they suddenly forgot to drink. The man continued, unaware of the silence forming around him. "Operations director is not an easy seat to fill. Your background at Harrington was exactly what we needed." Caleb shook his hand. "I appreciate the opportunity." That was all. But sometimes all it takes is one ordinary sentence to collapse a carefully built lie. Melissa had told people he was unemployed, drifting, uncertain, maybe even dependent. Tyler had stepped into the role of rescuer beside a woman who claimed she was choosing stability. And there stood Caleb, in a clean suit, holding a new job with better pay and better title than the one he had lost. Melissa's mother looked at her daughter. Tyler looked at the floor. The story in the room changed without Caleb raising his voice. A few minutes later, Melissa found him near the side terrace where winter sunlight touched the empty tables. "You got a job," she said, as if the fact belonged partly to her. Caleb looked over the lawn. "Yes. Why did you not tell me?" He turned then, slowly. "You stopped being someone I share good news with." The sentence did not come out cruel. It came out clean. That made it worse for her. Her eyes shone, but he did not step closer. Tyler appeared behind her, tense and pale. "Caleb," he said, "we never meant for it to happen like this." Caleb looked at the man who had once been his brother in everything but blood. "No, you meant for it to happen quietly." Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it. There are truths people cannot answer because answering would require becoming honest in front of themselves. Caleb reached into his jacket, took out the small envelope he had prepared, and handed it to Melissa. Karen will send the updated documents Monday. My employment status has changed. So has my willingness to carry anyone else's version of me. Melissa held the envelope against her bouquet, her fingers tightening around both like she could not decide which life she was supposed to be holding. Caleb walked past them toward the exit. Behind him, music started again too loudly, the kind of cheerful sound people use to cover a room that has gone cold. He did not look back. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. He loosened his tie, crossed the parking lot, and got into his old truck. The engine started on the first try. For the first time in weeks, he laughed softly, not because he had won, but because he had not been destroyed. And sometimes that is the victory nobody sees coming. Caleb drove away from the country club with the windows cracked, letting the cold Ohio air move through the cab like a reset button for his lungs. Behind him, the music, flowers, speeches, and polished lies shrank in the rearview mirror until they became just another building beside a road he no longer needed to take. He did not call Melissa. He did not call Tyler. He did not replay every face in the room looking for apology, shame, or regret. That was the old habit, the one that made him search other people for confirmation that his pain had been real. He did not need that anymore. The truth had stood in the room by itself and done more than anger ever could. By Monday, Karen Whitmore sent the updated documents, and the settlement language changed tone almost immediately. Melissa's claim that Caleb had become unstable during unemployment lost its weight once the new job offer, severance record, interview timeline, and written communication were placed in order. Tyler's name did not become a scandal because Caleb had no interest in turning his life into gossip, but it did become context. Context matters. It shows who stood where when the house began to burn. Over the next few months, the divorce moved forward quietly. Caleb started the operations director role near Dayton and found that competence still felt like oxygen. He rented a small apartment closer to work, with plain white walls, a decent kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a parking lot full of people coming and going from lives he knew nothing about. It was not glamorous. It was peaceful. On his first Friday there, he bought a cheap coffee maker, a set of towels, and one framed print of Lake Erie at sunrise. He hung it crooked, fixed it, then laughed because there was nobody there to tell him it looked cheap. Melissa sent one email 6 weeks after the wedding. It was shorter than he expected. She said the reception had been difficult after he left. She said people were asking questions. She said Tyler felt judged. Caleb read the message once and closed the laptop. For years, he had treated Melissa's discomfort like an emergency. Now it was information, not his assignment. Tyler never called again. That silence taught Caleb something too. Some friendships only survive when you stay useful to the other person's version of themselves. The day the divorce finalized, Caleb drove back to the old house one last time. The maple tree out front had started turning red at the edges. The mailbox still leaned slightly to the right. He stood in the kitchen where the unemployment letter had opened his eyes and where Melissa had mistaken one bad season for his entire worth. The room looked smaller now, but not haunted, just finished. He placed his house key on the counter, took one slow breath, and walked out without touching the walls. 6 months later, Caleb was not rich, not famous, not magically healed. He was simply steady again. He had a job that respected his experience, an apartment that held no insults, and mornings that belonged to him. Sometimes he still missed the friend Tyler used to be, or the wife Melissa had been before ambition turned her love conditional. Missing someone is not the same as wanting them back. That was a lesson he had earned one quiet day at a time. In the end, Caleb did not crush them by making a speech or exposing private things in front of a crowd. He crushed the story they tried to tell by refusing to live inside it. He showed up clean, calm, and employed. He let truth do the heavy lifting. And when the people who left him realized he was not falling apart, their version of him fell apart instead. So what do you think? Was Caleb right to attend that wedding with dignity? Or should he have stayed away and let them keep their performance untouched? Have you ever seen someone mistake a hard season for a person's whole value? If stories like this remind you that quiet strength still matters, stay with this channel. Because some lessons are easier to hear in a story than to learn after the people you trusted rewrite your name.